guess so. That's what it sounds like. Oh, man. We are at 15. We're on to 15, 16, 17. Lord wills. We're going to try. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been on these pages, man. Sure. I think it's 6:59, but I'm gonna need that extra minute. So we are back in Job. He has been suffering this whole time, so we need to get to this so we can get him out of that suffering. We know that Job chapter 42, the end of this is so awesome to read. You see how God blesses him, and it's just amazing. But seeing him down in this deep pit makes you appreciate that moment even more. So we're going to look through this together. We're in Job chapter 15. And Brother Jack and I both laughed, but we are going to try to get 15, 16, and 17 covered tonight. I'll say this, if you didn't get a chance to go to the gospel meeting at Forest Park, Brother Vessel really did a great job. I know some of us were there last night. Preached through the Sermon on the Mount, very basic, very calming and simple, but it was extremely powerful and challenging. So I want to encourage you, if you get a chance, to go back and listen to that. It was last night's sermon. And had lunch with him today, just an awesome preacher, great encourager. He said tonight he's preaching through Romans chapter 8 and restoring our passion for assurance. So that's another one you want to go back and listen to. You can go to Forest Park's Facebook or YouTube. It'd be worth your time, I promise you. So we are in Job 15. We want to begin with a word of prayer in just a moment as we enter into this study. This is the second cycle, beginning the second cycle of speeches. So Job has suffered. All three friends have come. They've said their piece. Now they're about to start over. Here comes the second cycle. So before we dive into that, let's go to God in prayer. Our Father and our God, we are just so very thankful for the opportunity to approach your throne of grace in prayer. Father, what a privilege it is to be able to communicate to you. And we're thankful that you have communicated with us through your word. We're thankful for the power of your word and for its perfection. And the fact that it is that standard in a world where there's so much confusion and debate. We're thankful that we have this absolute standard of truth to go by and to follow. And we're just grateful, Father, for your word. We're thankful for the example of Job. I pray, Father, that we will focus tonight as we read from your word and we study it, that we will apply it to our lives and be better servants for you as we leave this place here tonight. Be with us and watch over us as we study. In Jesus' name, amen. So just diving right into it, Job 15, you'll notice Eliphaz begins his second speech. His first speech, remember Job chapters 4 and 5, and so it was pretty lengthy. This speech is not going to be as long, but it's definitely going to be sharp. We might say it's sharper than his first one. And you'll notice that as these speeches, as they hit a new cycle, they get even more direct. And so they're more bold and rash with their speeches. The final speech of Eliphaz will be in Job chapter 22. So notice how that's spaced out. Just kind of briefly thinking about his first speech, you remember what he basically said to Job. Job, you're in this situation because you've sinned. That's why you're suffering. That's why you're going through so much. In fact, he would say, Job, why don't you just take this as punishment? Why don't you take this as correction? Take it the right way. In other words, allow it to be constructive criticism. Get better from it and move on. That was basically his first speech. Well, you'll notice that his second speech is more of an accusation. really. It's not really challenging Job to change anything. He's just letting Job know, Job, you're wrong. He just wants to keep hammering on to Job. Job, you are wrong. And so in verses 1 through 13, we're going to notice it was a misapplied rebuke. A misapplied rebuke. Someone read for us verses 1 through 6, Job 15. All right, verse 6 as well. All right, thank you. So look at this, kind of summing it up. Job, here's what I'm hearing from you. All your talk is unprofitable. It's not doing anybody any good. Your own mouth condemns you. Notice how he says, listen, I'm not condemning you. You're doing that to yourself, Job. Your own lips are testifying against you. And so he begins this second speech just accusing Job. Job, this is why you're going through this. This is your issue. Very quickly, looking at 7 through 13, he brings out some sarcasm. Are you the first man who was born? Were you made before the hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you limit wisdom to yourself? Job, are you the only one who understands wisdom? What do you know that we don't know? What do you understand that's not in us? Well, how would you answer that? What does Job know that they don't know at this time? He knows some real suffering, doesn't he? He knows suffering that they haven't endured yet. He knows by experience. And he knows God. Brother Alderman, I think that's the point that needs to be emphasized the most. Their theology is dead wrong the whole time. They already have their mind made up about God. They had their mind made up about man's relationship to God. But Job actually was a righteous man. Job actually was in the right relationship with God. They didn't get that because they didn't have it. And we know that because the end of the book, remember God tells them, you go to Job and ask him to pray for you. Because y'all are wrong. Y'all missed it. Y'all misapplied that. They didn't understand. Job has gone through so much, and yet they come to him and kick him while he's down. I was reading Charles Swindle, the book that Brother Jack allowed me to borrow. Been just phenomenal how he ties everything together. He talked about this woman who had been married, and her husband died in a car crash, and it was very sudden, very immediate, and he was a doctor. And it talked about her children coming and loved ones coming and comforting her and being there for her. Well, and then 10 years later, she would go on to get her doctorate and be very successful. She died. And so she had married again. Her next husband was sitting there, and he said he went to go visit with him. He was there for 2 hours. And he said that man was just sitting there with crocodile tears and just could not contain himself. And he said, in that moment, it wouldn't have done him a bit of good for me to give him a sermon or give him a lesson of any kind, because he didn't know what that was like. That woman had suffered so much, and he had been through her those 10 years after losing her first husband, all the school that she went through, and then she passed away, and now all of that hit him. And he brought out the point, how horrible would it have been if I would have tried to say, this is your fault. And he tied that into Job's friends. Think about that. Eliphaz is bringing these accusations all the while. Job's still thinking about his 10 children that he buried. He's still thinking about his health that he's lost, his wife that said, curse God and die. He's in the midst of that suffering, and then here they are adding fuel to the fire, if you will. So kind of looking at it that way, I think helps. We try to picture what Job must have felt like going through that. So that's the misapplied rebuke. Second, notice the misplaced sarcasm, verses 14 through 16. Someone read that for us. 16, please. Man. So, again, their theology's off. Eliphaz is... I read that and I thought, man, there's just no hope for man then, I guess. Drink iniquity like water? I know I've made this point before. I want to make it again. We are not sinners. We're Christians. And there's a big difference. You see, a sinner is one who keeps on sinning. 1 John 3:9. Keeps on sinning with no incentive to change. I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing. Don't plan on changing. That is by definition a sinner. But a Christian is one who recognizes I'm going to mess up. But when I sin, I'm going to handle it God's way. 1 John 1:9. I'm going to confess that. I'm going to repent. Psalm 51. And what does the Bible say? The blood of Christ will keep on cleansing you as you keep on walking in the light. Part of walking in the light is confessing when you mess up and getting back up and keep going. So, by definition, a Christian and a sinner is not the same thing. A Christian can sin, but he's not going to be in a state of that. So he's not a sinner. I think that's a thing that we need to grasp, because here's the problem. If I wake up and say I'm just a sinner, guess what? I'm going to use that as a cop-out, won't I? Well, I'm going to give into this. It's okay because I'm just a filthy sinner. Best I can do is filthy rags. We read in the book of Isaiah. No. What's the Bible say? Be holy, for I am holy. 1 Peter 1:13 through 17. If I'm in the sinning business, I need to get out of it. Romans 6:1. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. So again, there's a difference between staying in this state of sin, just rolling in it, and committing that, recognizing it, handling it God's way, and getting back on track. Yes, sir. He did. He did. Right. See? Exactly. No middle ground here. I mean, you're not only sinning, you are drinking it like water. Yeah. And that's why I titled that Misplaced Sarcasm. Just listen to what he's saying. Job, you're saying that you're pure. What is man that he can be pure? Job, you're claiming to be righteous. He who was born of woman, could he be righteous? Just think about what is misplaced here. If God puts no trust in his saints, wait a minute. God does entrust his saints, doesn't he? Doesn't he entrust those who proclaim the gospel to go and do that? We have this in earthen vessels to go and proclaim the truth. When you think about some of this, and I just kind of piece together a few of these, what is man that he can be pure? Let's remember that when we come into this world, we are pure. We're not born sinners. We're not born inheriting sin, as so many have taught falsely throughout the years. You go and you watch a baby be born, you hold a baby for the first time. You're not going to get more pure and innocent and perfect than that. You're not. But what happens? That baby grows up. They learn the difference between good and evil. Then they make the decision to do what's wrong. That's how sin takes place. But that child is perfect and innocent and pure in the sight of God. And we know that from Genesis 1:26 and 27. We are made in what? In the image of God. So our purity reflects our Creator. He creates us. He's pure. Therefore, when we are born, we are pure. We're the ones that grow up and mess up. Proverbs 21:8 carries the same idea with that Hebrew parallelism, talking about purity. What about this one? Man born of woman could be righteous. He said, that can't happen. Wait a minute. Who do we read about in Luke chapter 1 and verse 6? Parents of John the Immerser. Who were they? That's it. Zechariah and Elizabeth. You know what it said of them? They were righteous. They were righteous before God. 1 John 2:29, 1 John 3:7. My little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous. What are you saying, John? If I do what's right, I can be righteous? I can be right before God? Yes. Now you take Jesus Christ out of the equation, you can forget about it. There is no righteousness apart from Jesus. But can we be righteous? Yes, we can. Psalm 119, 172, all your commandments are what? Righteousness. Jesus came to fulfill all righteousness. Matthew chapter 3. So when I keep the commandments of God, I can be right with God. And there are individuals who did that. So again, just pointing out his sarcasm that's misplaced. Yes, sir. Yes. Absolutely. The tongue shall speak of your righteous judgments. Absolutely. And so just in that small section, you can see how Eliphaz is continuing to go down this road, like Justin said, 0 to 100 is what Eliphaz does. There's no comfort in his voice, and we're going to notice that, chapter 16, what Job calls them. But in 17 through 35, we read of multiplied wounds. Just very quickly, I want to look at this. I will tell you, hear me, what I have seen I will declare. Remember, Eliphaz is probably the oldest of the group. So he says, listen, Job, I'm wiser than you are. Right? I've been there, I've done that. Let me tell you what I've seen. It almost gives him this platform. Job, I can do this because I've been there and done that. So let me speak to you for a minute. And that's what you have in this section. It's just some of the things that jumps out. The biggest one is verse 25. For he stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with his strong and bossed shield. The NIV says he shook his fist at God. Eliphaz, Job, you have shaken your fist in the face of God, and that's why you're suffering the way that you are. Job, you shouldn't be surprised at this. But is that not misplaced? Job didn't do anything wrong. The Bible comes out and says that. And none of this did Job sin with his mouth. And yet, if it were up to Eliphaz, he's drinking iniquity like water. Verse 31, notice this. Let him not trust in futile, empty, vain things, deceiving himself, for futility will be his reward. That's a sermon in and of itself. What do you trust in? Well, if you trust is vain, that's what it's going to be. You ain't kidding. Yeah, the whole time. Yeah. Yeah. It's as if someone came up to you and said, you have zero faith. You don't trust in God at all. Yeah. That's stern. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Not always. Not always. Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, of course. And they had zero of that. But their mindset was, Job, this has got to be the conclusion. Because there's no way you could be right and suffer. But the Bible is a complete contradiction of that. Look at Jesus. They did. Yep. You must have done something wrong. John chapter 9 is an example. I know that's later. I know what you're saying. But John 9 with the blind man, the disciples, what did this man do? What did his parents do who was born blind? And Jesus said, wasn't his sin? Wasn't his parents' sin? Yeah. That's true. That's true. But they sure do come across like they got it figured out, especially Eliphaz. Cain and Abel. Abel didn't do a thing wrong. Righteous Abel. His blood still cries out from the ground, and he suffered. That's it. So were the Pharisees. Yeah, they were wrong. Absolutely right. Yeah. But that's a really good question, and it's, yeah, which we're in here. Right. Mm-hmm. That's true. Very true. It's not. That's right. What, something profound and
Well, because it makes some very serious demands,
yeah,
just as he did in that day and time.
that's true.
A lot of people just don't want to hear that.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Right. And he will. And make no mistake, these conversations, that's from Satan. Satan's behind that. Um, which we're gonna talk about that in 16 too. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. There's never been a time in the history of man when God didn't communicate with man. Romans 1. Right. Absolutely. That's right. And that's right. And Abel, by faith, obeyed. How does faith come? Hearing the word of God. So Abel had to hear from God. That's right. Exactly. And it all comes down to choice. Sure.
The book is not just about Job and his personal suffering.
Right.
It's also about the conflict between good and evil,
Absolutely, it is.
between God and Satan, and between righteous men and men who think they're righteous,
Mm-hmm. Righteous in their own eyes.
righteous in their own eyes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all three friends and Eliphaz, Bildad especially, they refer back to the old ancients, the wisdom. So maybe they're thinking about something that was written or something that was said. They're like, oh, I'm going to refer back to that. But now they're claiming to have this kind of wisdom that, they're right and Job is just wrong, dead wrong. Yeah, sure. They did. They started by sitting with him for 7 days and not saying anything. That was the best thing they could have done. And in that time frame, Miss Tanya, 7 days, they're probably sitting there thinking, you know what? Job, this is happening because he's wrong. And I got to go tell him about it. Oh, man. Does. What wise men have told, not hiding anything received from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, no alien passed among them. In other words, those old wise men of old, what they've said, that's what I'm going to go with. That's a good point. Been passed down. Nothing different today. Nothing different today. Man, oh man. Those are great questions. I appreciate everybody contributing to that. And this is a deep study. I mean, trust me, I don't claim to have it all figured out. It gets me every week, every chapter. I'm like, man, how am I going to explain that? We're working through this together. But those are really good questions. It makes you think. Where's Eliphaz coming from? Why is he thinking this? Yeah, well, it comes from man. Sir? Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Mm. Right. It does. And it's almost like the frustration builds because Job won't come out and say, okay, yeah. Right. And that's what they want him to do. And Job says, listen, I'm maintaining my innocence. Man, that's good stuff. That's going to bring us into Job's response. Let's go ahead and go there. Brother Jack, if I'm going to get to 17. Notice how I piece 16 and 17 together. So if I don't get there, remember, we tried. Job's agony, 16:1 through 5. Job answered and said, I have heard many such things. Look at this. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall words of wind have an end? What provokes you that you answer? I also could speak as you do. If your soul were in my soul's place, Eliphaz, if you've walked a mile in my shoes, it'd be a little bit different. I could heap up words against you. I could shake my head at you, but look at what Job would do. Eliphaz, if I were in your shoes, right? If you were the one suffering and I had an opportunity to come to you, what would I do? I would strengthen you with my mouth and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief. Does that not speak to the character and integrity of Job? That's what Job would do. He said, you know what? I wouldn't be coming at you the way you're coming at me. I think that's something for us as Christians to remember. Sometimes we may be hurt. Sometimes we may think that that person is deep in sin and I need to go tell them about it. I need to remember that when somebody's suffering and struggling, I need to be there to strengthen them with my mouth and to comfort them, because your words can do a lot of damage. They can do a lot of good, but they can do a lot of damage. James talks about that. The same mouth, blessings and cursings. Talks about that water. Is it going to give something sweet and bitter? No, of course not. So Job's agony, miserable comforters. Miserable comforters. We're going to look at that when we get to 4 responses from Job after walking through this. Look at Job's enemy. Notice I have it in quotation marks. Here's why. Who does Job think is his enemy? God. I remember just sitting here typing that out thinking, wow, this is God who he serves. This is God who he loves. But now he thinks God is against him. God's not answering him. He's not defending him. And Job thinks God is the one causing this. Notice this language. Though I speak, my grief is not relieved. If I remain silent, how am I eased? It doesn't matter if I talk about it. If I keep it all inside, there's no ease. Verse 7, but now he has worn me out. Look at that language. God has worn me out, Job says. You've made desolate all my company. You've shriveled me up. It's a witness against me. My leanness rises up against me and bears witness to my face. He, speaking about God, tears me in his wrath and hates me. What a horrible outlook. But that's where Job is. He gnashes at me with his teeth. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. Who's the real adversary? Well, it's Satan, isn't it? 1 Peter 5, 8, 9. Satan loves this. Don't you think Satan's loving this? Sitting back on nobody pay attention to me. Yes, Job, blame God for it. Absolutely. Don't mind me over here. Satan's behind every bit of this. But Job is just, this is what Job's feeling. Now look at verse 10. This is a prophetic statement. They gape at me with their mouth. They strike me reproachably on the cheek. They gather together against me. What's that sound like? Crucifixion. Psalm 22:13, John 18:22, John 19:3. Same language. Job, of course, as a type of Christ with the way that he suffered wrong for doing right. Same language. Think about those at the foot of the cross. Powerful to think about. Verse 11, God has delivered me to the ungodly. He turned me over to the hands of the wicked. I was at ease. My life was going great. But he has shattered me. He also has taken me by the neck, shaken me to pieces. Listen to this. He has set me up for his target. His archers surround me. 4 words, 4 verbs. Number 1, he pierces my heart and does not pity. Doesn't bother him. Number 2, he pours out my gall on the ground. Number 3, he breaks me with wound upon wound. Number 4, he runs at me like a warrior. This is Job's picture of God in this moment. He pierces me, he pours out my gall, he breaks me, and he runs at me. So Job's enemy. Again, there's those passages if you'd like to have them. His agony, his enemy, but look at how this chapter ends. Here's Job's remedy. For just a moment as you read this, you can see a little bit of comfort, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I have sewn sackcloth over my skin. I laid my head in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and on my eyelids is a shadow of death. Although no violence is in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, do not cover my blood. Let my cry have no resting place. Surely, even now, my witness is in heaven, and my evidence is on high. I love that. I love that verse. When you do what's right, people that are doing what's wrong will hate you. It's just the truth of the matter. When you're doing what's right, you're going against what they're doing in their lifestyle, and therefore you're the bad guy. You stand up and you say homosexuality is a sin. God hates it and condemns it. Guess what? The wicked people in the world are going to hate you for it. Does that make it less true? Now, of course, speak the truth in love, but speak the truth nonetheless. Even now, my witness is in heaven. I don't need to worry so much about what men are going to say and think about me. Brother Vessel said last night, you take care of your character, God will take care of your reputation. My witness is in heaven. My evidence is on high. God knows exactly what I'm doing. He knows I'm striving to do what's right. People are going to try to bring you down, just like Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, trying to bring him down. He says, my evidence is on high. My friends scorn me, verse 20. My eyes pour out tears to God. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God as a man pleads for his neighbor. For when a few years are finished, I shall go the way of no return. Don't you wish you could just interject and go give Job a hug and say, Jesus is coming? One might plead for man with God. That's exactly what Jesus did. And so thinking about this statement, my witness is in heaven, my evidence is on high. We can have peace in that. When the ungodly people in the world, maybe it's even your own family members that do this, you can have peace knowing, you know what, God knows I'm trying to do what's right. That can give you that comfort. Yes, sir. Oh, it absolutely would. Exclusive. No, he didn't. He lost everything except his faith. That's the one thing that Job never lost throughout all this. It's a great point. And it is, and it needs to be brought out. Notice that in Hebrews 9:24. Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. If that doesn't comfort you and excite you, I don't know what will. Jesus, as our great high priest, he's in the presence of God for you and for me. You see, Job didn't have that blessing. Now, of course, the blood of Jesus transcends time. It's going to flow backwards and forwards. Ultimately, if you're going to be right, it's because of Jesus' blood. But what a blessing we have, that we have the New Testament. We can read the gospel accounts. We can read about Jesus who did come, who did die, who did rise up from the grave, who is at the right hand of God. So it's powerful to think about Job and his response. Y'all are miserable comforters, what you are. Chapter 17, here's Job's plea. I want you to notice, somebody read verse 1, and just think about the three statements that he makes. Wow. My spirit is broken. You ever talk to somebody that's just made a similar statement? Not my heart is broken. My spirit, the very essence of my being is broken. My days are extinguished. I have no reason to get up and watch the sunrise tomorrow. Talk about somebody that's suffering. He says the grave is ready for me. And I believe Job in this moment in time would say, you know what, I would welcome that. Just a few more thoughts. Verse 6, he has made me a byword of the people. I have become one in whose face men spit. Verse 9, yet the righteous will hold to his way. He who has clean hands will be stronger and stronger. verse 15. Where then is my hope? There's a sermon title. As for my hope, who can see it? Hope is desire plus expectation. It's something you can see and take hold of. But in this moment in time, Job says, I can't see it. Who can see it? So Job is praying for relief. This is his plea. And that takes us 15, 16, and 17. With our time remaining, I want to point this out. This is not original with me. This is from Charles Swindoll's book. But I thought the way that he described this is helpful for me and hopefully for you too. 4 responses from Job. Number 1, he is disgusted. You are all miserable comforters. And I did a word study on miserable and a word study on comforters. Miserable here in the Hebrew means a source of difficulty or just simply trouble. Miserable. They were not a source of strength. They were not stability that he needed. They were a source of difficulty. In other words, they made his problems worse. As Christians, we need to make sure that we don't do that. Don't make a brother or sister's problem worse. Miserable. But then comforters. A person who commiserates. I had to look that one up. It means to express or feel sympathy. A person who expresses or is sympathetic with one who has experienced misfortune. Had Job experienced some misfortune? He had, unlike anybody had ever seen. So they should have been there. But they were miserable at doing that. They were not the kind of comforters he needed. So he's disgusted. Number 2, he is distressed. When you get to this point and say, God has worn me out, he feels like he's on the run from God, and he says, I can't outrun him. He's got his archers set up, and their arrow is ready to strike. What am I supposed to do? Again, 17:1, my spirit is broken, my days are extinguished, the grave is ready for me. Number 3, he is depressed. Been around somebody with depression, here's what it looks like. I've laid my head in the dust, my face is flushed from weeping. Cannot stop crying. Cannot get out of that dark hole, no matter what. Number 4, he's despondent. As for my hope, who can see it? That's where Job is. His friends are making it worse. And guess what? We got 2 more speeches coming. Bildad and Zophar. They'll do a 3rd cycle. And then Elihu's going to come and speak. Job is enduring all of this. Keep that in mind. But how refreshing it's going to be when we get to when God speaks. And he silences all the criticism. I'm looking forward to that. I know we got a ways to go, but just think about this. That's how Job responded to what was going on. So we got a few minutes left. I'm actually surprised that we do, but I'm excited that we do. Not used to this. Lessons we can glean from Job 15 through 17. Here's the first one. And we could spend the rest of our time tonight and pretty much all of next Wednesday night on this one. But just want to emphasize the error of inherited sin. When you think about Calvinism and you have that template of tulip, total hereditary depravity. That's how it all starts off. We're born in sin. It's inherited in my nature. I can't do anything about it. The Bible teaches personal accountability. The Son shall not inherit the sin of the Father shall not inherit from the Son. Romans 14:12, so each of us must give an account of ourselves to God. On the day of judgment, we will stand before the judgment seat of Christ to give an account of what we have done. I'm not going to stand for you. You can't stand for me. Personal accountability. That's important. One must reach a certain level of maturity before he or she is able to choose between good and evil. Those are some passages that you can read that emphasize that, especially Isaiah and Jeremiah bringing that language out. Again, you're not born in that state. As you mature, as you grow up, then that's when it occurs. Yes, ma'am. Well, it's hard because there's over 200 branches of the Baptist Church. So it's hard to say that. Okay. We could, well, simply, that's your issue right there. It's an issue with authority. I either respect the authority of God or I don't. Because the Bible says, he who believes and is baptized shall be saved. I either believe that or I don't. And if I don't, I'm going to find everything in the world to get around that, and that's what happens. Why do you think babies are christened? That's from a belief that they inherit sin. They're born in it. They need to be christened. Yeah, right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. And then you give into it and you say, well, I had to do it. It's my nature. Mm. Directly. If he does not, if you're not the elect, then he's not coming. Yeah, exactly. It don't matter. Just real quick, I know they're about to come in, but just kind of thinking about inherited sin. Children, qualities of children are set forth by Jesus. Jesus didn't say you need to become like these little children. They're heathen sinners. You need to become like them. Not what he said. He pointed out their humility and their innocence and their purity. Would he suggest they were born in sin? Of course not. The human spirit is given by God. The spirit is as pure as the source from which it came. I brought that out earlier. Finally, grace is always appropriate and always needed. There's some verses. I'll leave them up for a second if you want them. They needed more grace on Job. They didn't give him any. We need to remember to always give grace. Thank you all very much. Yes, sir.